Dissertation defense. My name is Caitlin Hope Winburn and my advisor is Dr. Sarah Pratt. The title of my dissertation is a holistic single case study to explore how Christian secondary teachers describe their self-efficacy in integrating faith into learning through classroom discussions. In today's presentation, we will start with the statement of the problem, a quick overview of the literature review. Then we will discuss the purpose statement, research question, theoretical framework, methodology, an overview of the findings with the connections to the literature. Then we'll finish with the implications and recommendations, limitations and delimitations, the distribution plan, and then you will also be able to see my references. The problem that guided this study is that existing research consistently highlights the difficulty Christian secondary teachers in schools face in preparing to effectively integrate faith and learning within their instructional practices. In a survey of 548 Christian secondary teachers certified through the Association of Christian Schools International, only 40% of those teachers reported that their faith influenced their instructional practices. There's a growing concern that Christian schools are not spending enough time focusing on spiritual formation, even though it's supposed to be a foundational piece of the mission, and it is one significant reason families selected the school. My literature review is broken into 4 main sections. The first section was faith and learning integration in Christian schools, which is broken into the 3 subcategories of the Christian school mission, school choice, and hiring Christian teachers for discipleship. The second main category of my literature review was intentional professional development for teachers. The subcategories were elements of effective PD, challenges to PD, PD and self-efficacy, and then PD and teacher motivation. The third section of my literature review compared student-centered and teacher-centered instructional approaches. The subcategories were the benefits of student-centered instruction, the characteristics of teacher-centered instruction, and the characteristics of the classical model of education. The final section of my literature review discussed the benefits of classroom discussion, with the subcategories faith and learning integration, the types of discussion, benefits of student-led discussion, and how to implement discussion. The purpose of this qualitative holistic single case study was to explore how Christian secondary teachers describe their self-efficacy for integrating faith and learning through classroom discussions after participating in a professional development opportunity on the Harkness method offered by a Christian independent school. The research question for this study was, how do Christian secondary teachers describe their self-efficacy for integrating faith and learning through classroom discussions after participating in a professional development opportunity on the Harkness method offered by a Christian independent school? The theoretical framework that informed my study was Bandura's self-efficacy theory. According to Bandura, self-efficacy can be defined as an individual's belief in their ability to perform a behavior necessary to produce an outcome. 4 sources of self-efficacy include vicarious experience, emotional arousal, verbal persuasion, and performance accomplishment. In my own study, I looked at how these 4 sources impacted Christian secondary teachers' self-efficacy for integrating faith and learning through discussion after participating in professional development. Through the professional development activities at the Harkness Conference, participants had an opportunity to experience vicarious experience through classroom observations. They experienced emotional arousal by building confidence to then implement classroom discussions with faith and learning after the conference. They experienced verbal persuasion with encouraging words during teacher and student panels, as well as encouraging words from colleagues after the conference. And they experienced performance accomplishments when they were able to successfully implement Harkness discussions after the conference. I used a qualitative, holistic, single case study for my research design. I had 4 participants who were Christian secondary teachers. I had 3 selection criteria for my participants, and those were that they participated in the 2023 or 2024 Harkness Conference. They attempted to implement the Harkness method after the conference, and they were full-time Christian secondary educators. I had 2 sources for data collection, which were questionnaires and semi-structured interviews. The findings of my study showed that Christian secondary teachers described their self-efficacy for integrating faith and learning through classroom discussions after participating in professional development as a catalyst for change, a pedagogy of releasing control, and a positive feedback loop. My second cycle codes led to 7 categories, which then led to 3 themes and 4 thematic statements. The 7 categories developed were ready to implement Harkness in their own classrooms, reasons for change, implementing intentional instructional strategies, discussion as a learning process, releasing control and trusting students to lead discussion, having positive feelings towards themselves, and receiving a positive response from their school community. The 4 thematic statements, which were the findings of this study, were first, conference activities were a catalyst for participants to recognize Harkness discussion as a different way to integrate faith and learning. Second, participants developed confidence in implementing intentional strategies to engage in Harkness discussion as a learning process. Third, participants developed confidence to prepare, release, and trust students to lead Harkness discussions centered on faith-based topics. And the final finding was, participants' self-efficacy for implementing Harkness discussions increased after experiencing positive feelings towards themselves and after receiving positive feedback from members of their school community. The finding that conference activities were a catalyst for participants to recognize Harkness discussion as a different way to integrate faith and learning connected to the literature in 3 ways. First, that professional development engagement increases with increased self-efficacy. Effective professional development should be collaborative, sustained, and relevant. And conversations about faith support the Christian school mission of formation. The second finding from this study, that participants developed confidence in implementing intentional strategies to engage in Harkness discussion as a learning process, is also connected to the literature. It is connected in the 3 following ways. First, that implementation includes preparation for discussion, it includes setting clear expectations for discussion, and effective implementation includes reflection after discussion. The next finding from this study is that participants developed confidence to prepare, release, and trust students to lead Harkness discussions centered on faith-based topics. This finding also has connections to the literature. The first connection is that student-led discussion increases student voice, cultivates community, and transfers the intellectual load to students. Another connection to the literature is that Harkness discussion centered on faith-based topics can help students develop a biblical worldview. The third connection is that faith-based discussions help students practice social emotional skills, explore their doubts, and helps teach them how to use evidence to support their beliefs. The final finding from this study is that participants' self-efficacy for implementing Harkness discussions increased after experiencing positive feelings towards themselves and receiving positive feedback from members of their school community. This finding is connected to the literature in 3 ways. First, self-efficacy increases with opportunities to build positive, collaborative relationships with peers during professional development. Second, student-centered instruction increases student engagement, peer cooperation, and student motivation. Third, hiring Christian educators capable of fostering relationships is important when looking for positive student feedback. The 3 key decision maker groups for my study are teachers, instructional leaders, and school leaders. Each group has implications and recommendations. For teachers, the primary implication of this study is that teachers' self-efficacy to implement the Harkness method increased after attending professional development. My recommendations for teachers include engaging in ongoing professional development, observing colleagues who are implementing the Harkness method, and then practicing using the Harkness method themselves. The implication from this study for instructional leaders is that they should consider opportunities for vicarious experiences, emotional arousal, and verbal persuasion when facilitating professional development opportunities. My recommendations for instructional leaders include planning professional development with collaborative, active learning, incorporating observation opportunities, and attending future Harkness conferences. The implication for school leaders from my study is that they should provide positive feedback that increases teachers' confidence in implementing the Harkness method. My recommendation for school leaders is to schedule time for observations, ask experts at their school to lead that professional development for the Harkness method, to allocate funds for professional development, and encourage implementation of classroom discussion. My study had 4 limitations, including time, the fact that I was unable to generalize my findings to the greater population, that I used self-reported data, and since I led the conference for the professional development, my participants might have reported what they thought I wanted to hear rather than their honest opinions. My study had 2 delimitations, including participant exclusion criteria. I was only interested in the experiences of Christian secondary teachers. And then the research problem itself was a delimitation. I didn't focus on any other research problems. I plan on sharing my findings with teachers at my school through professional development sessions, and I also plan on encouraging teachers to attend the Harkness Conference if they've already attended the Harkness Conference, to encourage their colleagues to attend, as well as attending conferences on classroom discussion and faith and learning integration at other schools. For instructional leaders, I plan on creating an infographic with the findings from my study and sending it to other instructional leaders through the listserv from the Council on Educational Standards and Accountability. I plan on submitting a proposal to lead a breakout session at the annual Fall 2026 CISA Symposium, in which I can share my findings with other school leaders and administrators. Thank you for taking the time to watch my dissertation defense video. On the following slides, you'll see the references for all sources listed throughout this video.